I did a TEDx talk last year that did rather well globally, got some attention, called "Rebranding the Brain: Neurodiversity at Work," and I addressed the issue of identity and how identity is up to the individual. And so just regarding the superpower thing, like I said, I'm good at a lot of stuff, and I know you are too. And it took me a long time to learn that about me. Um, and on the days that I've accomplished my biggest moments in my life, I didn't leave my ADHD at home that day, right? So I know that that's because of, not in spite of my brain, and that's really important. So of course, I do feel like it's a strength. At the same time, certain cognitive barriers, ADHD included, have stood in the way. Whether they're internal barriers like the way your brain actually functions, or communication differences, etc., or external ones like stigma and bias and rigid work environments and things like that. They've stood in the way between people and leading really meaningful lives, and we can't discount that. And so,
hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people watching us from around the world, they say, we know where Canada is. And British Columbia is the place down in the west. And we know the big city called Vancouver. Where are you, John, in relation to Vancouver? Well, we're about 500 miles north of Vancouver, or for our friends in Europe, about 800 kilometers. And that puts us in the center of British Columbia, north, south, east, west, right in the center. What is Prince George all about? About 85,000 people. It's lots of forest all around us and lots of nature. Within 50 miles, we probably have 100 lakes. There is, as I said, lots of forest. There is lots of wildlife in terms of black bears, grizzly bears, caribou, deer, foxes, you name it, we have it. And we're living in harmony with nature. It's a beautiful, beautiful spot. So today, a very special guest. His name is David Thompson. And David has started early, became identified early in his profession as a professional with ADHD, dyslexia, and sensory processing issues. Dave Thompson has been an educator, innovator, an advocate in the field of neurodiversity employment since 2010. David, I'm your candidate. I'm pretty much all of it. ADHD, dyslexia, and the other things I'm not sure. But in any event, tell us a bit about yourself, David, about where were you born, but how did you start your education and then your career, and then ended up in neurodiversity?
Yeah. Thank you so much, John. Pleasure to be here. And I have to say that you've fully sold me on your little corner of Canada. Where do I sign up? Absolutely wonderful. I see why you do that. You should get paid by the tourism industry over there.
I like that. We'll talk to them about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're doing great things for the scene up there. So again, I'm Dave Thompson. Thrilled to be here. Thank you. As you kind of shared, I'll color that in a bit. I grew up on Long Island, outside of New York City. And I was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia right when I started kindergarten, right at 5 years old.
Oh my!
There are so many people like yourself. I know, much later in life for you, you learned this identity about yourself, and that's such an important story. More and more people every day share that story with you, but that is not mine. I come much through the more traditional path of special education classes and being raised kind of based on perceived deficits and kind of through a medical-based or clinical model of me and how my brain works. So again, separate classroom and things like that. I did get some extra support and empathy and understanding, but I feel like I missed out on a lot. There was a lot of stigma around, having to go to that separate class from my peers, and I missed out on a lot of opportunity, and therefore kind of really struggled to find my path, especially when the school bus stopped coming for me, right? So in the United States, that's often referred to as falling off the cliff for young people who need some extra support or have benefited from that extra support. And so when I reached adulthood. I didn't really have much. I hadn't had many opportunities to explore my strengths, my passions, my perspectives, and I didn't feel like I was really good at anything. Now, fast forward to now, not to toot my own horn, John, but toot toot. I know I have a lot to offer the world of work, right? But at the time, I really didn't understand what I wanted to do or where I fit in. And so all I could picture doing was kind of changing the world. That was very broad, but changing the world to make it work for people who think like me. I started trying to be the person who I needed when I was younger, and that had to do with job coaching for people who could use some extra help in their careers. So working for, I've kind of found my path once I joined up a small social enterprise in New York where it was an autistic majority workforce, and I helped to design the programming there, everything from how to interview, how to assess, how to train, how to support this workforce at this small company where 65% of the employees are autistic or otherwise different thinkers, right? And I realized that I was good at it. First of all, I was innovating and I was ideating, and this was a very, very new idea years ago at the time. And I realized that I was good at it because of my brain, not in spite of my brain,
Exactly.
right? And that was extremely empowering for me. And everything's been on a sharp uphill trajectory ever since for me. So fast forward a bit. Meanwhile, companies like Microsoft and Ernst & Young were adopting neurodiversity employment initiatives at their companies. Some of the biggest and best funded companies in the world were doing this work in a different way. And I
So,
managed to get on the phone with some of those companies.
so
And
where was the point, Dave, that you knew that you had that extra ability and that created the turnaround for you in terms of saying, I'm very good at some issues that I should further explore? Were you already then in your 20s, or how
yeah,
old were you?
yeah, I was well into my 20s, and kind of because I had this altruistic mission of supporting people who were in my position but at a younger point in life, and hopefully to change the world of work that was largely unfocused. Started, luckily I was able to have the room kind of in nonprofit startup kind of culture
Right.
to be an intrapreneur, like an entrepreneur, but within a company, have a lot of room to design. We're natural designers and creatives and big picture thinkers, and I was able to kind of come up with, well, what color should the walls be? How loud should the hand dryers in the bathrooms be? And how do we let people show you their strengths rather than prove it to us in some sort of panel interview format or something like that, right?
Now, but I heard you say, I'm an entrepreneur, not an entrepreneur. And
Hmm.
I've not heard that term before. I love it though. I'm going to use
Thank
it
you.
in the future.
Please do.
Is that something? I'm not familiar with that word.
I can't take credit for it, but I haven't heard it
Okay.
many times. I will say
No,
that, but that just means, I might not want to be an entrepreneur in that I don't want to do payroll and I don't want to deal with legal systems and things like that. I don't want to do sales contracts, but I sell ideas and I create programs, and I
I
want lots of room to be
I
able
love
to,
it.
yeah, and I
That's
can contribute. I can contribute to organizations in a really big way when I'm given the room to write my own job description and show up how I want to show up, right?
I like
Um,
it.
and so just to finish my kind of life story, and thanks for bearing with me,
Yeah.
I got on the phone with some of these companies that were starting these proactive hiring initiatives, some of the biggest companies in the world, and I felt so lucky to get on the phone with them. I said, I don't know, what am I going to get, some computers or something, talking to Microsoft, maybe, who knows? I work for a nonprofit. And they were thanking me for getting on the phone with them, and
Yeah.
what they said was, we have a lot, you're starting this stuff from the ground up. You have so much room. We're working within big bureaucratic clunky systems, trying to figure out how to retroactively shape the world of work to work for everybody. So we have a lot to gain from you as well. And so I've been in touch with those companies ever since. So was my boss and mentor, Jeff Miller, who started Potentia Workforce in 2019. And long story short, Potentia Workforce works with companies around the globe to help them move forward through thinking differently about their talent, whether that's recruiting, proactively recruiting ND thinkers, or coaching, consulting, training their workforces to make a better world of work for everybody. So we work with everybody from companies with a few hundred employees, but mostly some of the world's largest organizations like Chevron, PNC Bank, AIG, etc.
So what is the
And
name? Just kind of looking. What is the name of the company again?
it's Potentia, like
Oh
potential
yeah.
without the
Oh
L.
yeah, I see it now. Potentia, yeah.
Yes.
So that deals in particular aims to drive employee engagement through embracing neurodiversity.
Yeah, for sure. So we have four key kind of services that we offer, but one of them is recruiting. So when
Yeah.
you hear about neurodiversity employment, oftentimes you'll hear about a company like Microsoft, who we've been collaborating with since the beginning, who proactively bring in, they ask themselves, what needs to change to actually invite in, support, embrace, and leverage different kinds of thinkers. And then they make those changes. So we help companies to do that. We also, of course, companies have to be walking the walk. It's not about just simply neurodiversifying the workforce and putting people into seats. It's about,
Yeah.
you see huge benefits on neuroinclusive teams. So you see engagement and retention and productivity and innovation, agility all go up. But that's only when companies are really walking the walk.
Exactly.
Because those changes benefit every single employee, first of all. And the second reason for that is that it allows employers to tap into what I like to call neuro-exceptional skills. So when you think about the things that you and I are really good at, or when you think about some of the stereotypes and common themes around the autistic experience or something like that, you're not going to be able to tap into those things if they're not even they're not able to work at your company because of the barriers that they face. So we want to knock those down. But B, a lot of them are already working at your company, but they're not bringing their whole selves to work, right? So we want to change that, and then you can tap into those incredible skills.
Amazing. Amazing.
Thank,
Now,
thank you.
the other part about it is just talking a little bit about me, is that I was born in Holland in
Yes.
1940, and I'm nearly 84 years old, actually. And okay, let me restate that. I'm nearly 84 years young, and and so I was not a success story academically. I failed grade 3, and I failed grade 7 3 times. And so they said, oh my God, what are we going to do with this guy? So some people advised my parents they should send me to the school of the mentally challenged individuals. They said, no, we're not going to do that. We'll teach him a trade. Now, my grandfather was a master carpenter. Sorry, my grandfather was a master carpenter, and my dad works in the lumber industry. So they said, how about making him a furniture maker? So we'll send him to a furniture factory, and there he can work. So at 13, I became a laborer in a furniture factory. Now, your friends and the younger people are not always forgiving about each other, and so the friends that I had growing up with, they went to college and university, and I became a laborer. I'm proud of that today, but then I was kind of looked down at, and so I was always troubled by that. Why am I so different? I was very successful. I was very successful in school. I was good at writing, not reading, because I'm dyslexic. I didn't know that then, obviously. But I was not good at reading, but I was good at writing. And I was very good at numbers. Anyway, so I did that, and then the other part that I have to add to it, I grew up to the beginning of the Second World War in 1940. My mom and dad were married in 1938. They were in love, and the world was a paradise for them. They had a boy and a girl fairly quickly in their marriage, and my mom was pregnant with me in 1940, and then Hitler invaded Europe, in particular Holland as well. And so my dad was called into the army, and the last time they heard from him was at the bombing of Rotterdam, where thousands and thousands of people died. So for 5 years, she wouldn't know if he lived or died. And so she was all on her own, pregnant with me until November, and then the boy and the girl. So what I first remember of that is that when I was 3.5, 4 years old, when we had lots and lots of hundreds and hundreds of planes, bombers overhead, bombing Germany, northwestern Germany in particular. We were living in northeastern Holland, 10 or 15 minutes from the border. And so my mom would take us outside in the evenings because not so much to see the planes. I can still hear the sound of the planes, hundreds of them, an unbelievable sound. And she did take us outside because she felt safer outside than inside. And in the distance, we would see the cities burning or the sky being red. Hamburg, Kiel, Bremen, Wilhelmshaven, all those places in the distance. And then the next thing that I remember, we were liberated April the 12th, 1945 by the Canadian Army as part of the Allied forces that landed in Normandy in June or July of 1944. And so the Canadians pushed through France, Belgium, Holland, and then pushed the Germans through the western part of Holland, through the border back into Germany. Things got pretty rough in the area where we lived. And and I saw far too much that we should not have seen. But the winter, or the 1944 in particular, was all the food was cut off, and the kids, my brother, my sister, and myself, every morning we would go into the railroad yards looking for anything with gunny sacks, anything edible and burnable. And the reason that we did as kids, because the Germans wouldn't shoot us, they booed us one, well, we'd be back the following day. So, and then the other point that I remember is that was the coldest winter on record. And lots of kids, young people died because there was no heat. And older people that were vulnerable died. So I remember, and then the Canadians getting close to the Germans, and we saw far too much that we should not have seen. Today, I'm still affected by PTSD, the inner child, and all those kind of things. And then, obviously, I knew that when the Canadians liberated us, that I knew when I grew up, I would go to the land of our heroes, Canada. And I was trying to go when I was 17, but then was drafted into the Dutch Air Force. And then finally I went when I was 23. And I wanted to start with nothing, because I knew, I did not understand why am I different than everybody around me. And all of them were so successful in their careers, going to college and university. And I didn't, I just couldn't do that. And, and then I knew I wanted to start from the beginning. So I took a suitcase in July of 1965, and I was 23 years old, took a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and very little money, left Amsterdam to fly to Montreal, took the train across Canada, went to the immigration office in Vancouver, couldn't speak the language, didn't know soul, didn't have a job. And so fortunately there was a German fellow there, I could speak some German. I told him I wanted to build a lumber mill. That was my dream, to prove to myself that I could do that. And he said, go to Prince George, 500 miles north, 800 kilometers. And so that's what I did. I can still see the Greyhound station here, where it used to be. And I came off the Greyhound station here, and I had my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times. I had exactly $25.47. And so, but what I had lots of is attitude, that no matter what happens, if it is a bad day today, I'll swear it's a good day tomorrow. I avoid, even now still, anybody is negative, stay away from me. And then I had passion. I give, whatever I do, I give it 150%. The other one was work ethic, is that I work harder than anybody. And so I get up usually at 5:30 in the morning, and then I always make my bed, and I always feel I'm late. And so, and I love what I do. Every day when I work, I love doing what I'm doing. And obviously I've been working in companies as a laborer at first, but now I own quite a number of companies for the last 70 years. And I love every day, even now still at nearly 84 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So, but even then, when I was already successful here, starting from a cleanup man, lumber pile, blah, 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 I got a lumber mill, and I became quite successful in business, actually. And everybody would say to me, oh, you're so successful. I didn't feel that way. I felt I had failed still. And
In,
then,
imposter syndrome, right? The
yeah,
feeling of being unworthy or like you're faking it all the time. It's very common for people who've been through a lot, and people who think in a very different way from others.
you know what it was the change for me, Dave? I walked into a store here in January 1997, after I was here already for 32 years, and I picked up a book. I have the book right here. The book's title is Driven to Distraction by
Right.
Dr. Helliwell.
Yes,
And
I listened to the episode with
okay,
Dr. Helliwell on it.
yeah,
I told you before we started recording. I am a fan, so I'm familiar with some of this, but I appreciate it.
I love it. And I wrote in the book, it still is there, January 1997. I wrote it in Dutch because I was ashamed of it. Now I finally know who I am. And so, and the more I found out about it, the more I found that it is a superpower. And I still believe that today. And the more I read about it, the more I listened to, the more I started to include it in presentations that I gave. And then the other part that I found for me, can you imagine that it took me till I was 62, really? Because it took me 5 years after I got the book to go to my own doc. That was a personal friend, delivered our two daughters, and I walked into his office and he said, "Hey, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." And so we checked it out, and yes, I do. So there nearly for 50 years since I was 13, and had to leave school, become, and all my friends, and change my life. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I was different. I felt I then, even more so than ever, I had an obligation to speak about it. And so I speak about it, I podcast about it, I wrote a book about it. ADHD Unlocked. Very popular, actually. It's a typical, and you will like this, and you probably know this already. You can pick out the book anywhere. You can go either that way or the other way. It's always interesting. And it's telling it from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and amplifying these stories is elevating and amplifying ND voices whenever we can is so important, especially unique ones. And I must say, you told me how old you are, right? And I knew already because again I'm a fan. But you are one of the older people I know that carries the identity of ADHD. That does not mean that there aren't plenty of your peers that you grew up with that don't have it, but the fact that you're aware of it is a big deal, and that perspective is really important. And also your success. And just to speak on the superpower piece for a moment, I did a TEDx talk last year that did rather well globally, got some attention, called "Rebranding the Brain: Neurodiversity at Work." And I addressed the issue of identity and how identity is up to the individual. And so just regarding the superpower thing, like I said, I'm good at a lot of stuff, and I know you are too. And it took me a long time to learn that about me. Um, and on the days that I've accomplished my biggest moments in my life, I didn't leave my ADHD at home that day, right? So I know that that's because of, not in spite of, my brain, and that's really important. So of course, I do feel like it's a strength. At the same time, certain cognitive barriers, ADHD included, have stood in the way. Whether they're internal barriers like the way your brain actually functions, or communication differences, etc., or external ones like stigma and bias and rigid work environments and things like that. They've stood in the way between people and leading really meaningful lives, and we can't discount that. And so I I I believe that I have an extra strength. I don't know what I would be like without my ADHD, and I wouldn't want to cure it or change it or anything, right? Um, but that's an individual choice for me. Whereas I've heard some other people say, "Are you kidding? It's what destroyed my marriage," or "Are you kidding? It's what you know." And so I think that stories like ours are so important to help to change the world of work and school and community life, medicine, government, etc. So thank you for that.
So the other part which is important in our conversation, Dave, and I appreciate you have seen so much of my story, is that you were very fortunate to have parents that recognized that there was something different about you, so that you got diagnosed at a very early age, which still made things difficult because you were then considered to be different by your friends, likely in separate classes, all those kind of things. But for me, it took me till I was 62 years old. And so during that time, I always knew there was something different about me, but I didn't know what it was. And subsequently, I was not a good communicator and could not even communicate. I was okay. I was successful in business. I built businesses, and the one after the other, and everybody said, "Oh, you're so successful." I didn't feel that way, and
Right.
so until I saw the book from Dr. Halliwell, and I said, "Now I finally know who I am." Then the other part about it that I found interesting, and if you saw my interview with Dr. Halliwell, and for our guest watching, is my your podcast number 314, and on the Brink. The podcast with Dr. Halliwell was podcast number 203, on the Brink. And so, and you already said that too, and you know and agree with me because I know you do. I had the impression from reading the books that the frequency of occurrence is around 8 or 9% around the world. I don't believe that and did not believe that. So when I was talking to Dr. Halliwell, and he is the expert, not me, I suggested to him, in my opinion, subject to his opinion, that I believe that the occurrence of ADHD is at least 25%, is at least 20%, equal to male and female, although females show it differently than males. But he said to me, "No, John, at least 25%. I agree with him. The other thing that I found from being in business and on the boards of directors and lots of big businesses I'm involved in, and leaders of all different descriptions, that I suggested to Dr. Halliwell that in my experience, that I believe of the successful entrepreneurs or CEOs, at least 50% of them are ADHD. He said, "No, John, at least 75%. I agree with him." And then in a general sense, looking around, and I interact with new ones that have never talked to anybody virtually on a daily basis, where they say, "Hey, John, I'm really ADHD, blah, blah, blah." And, but that all around the world, the globe, I think the frequency of occurrence is likely closer to 30%, both male, female. And so that's why recognizing neurodiversity and neuro issues are so critically important, and to recognize it at an earlier age. But the other part, which is very, very important, and I addressed it somewhat in my book, is our schooling system that we have today, respectfully, is not effective in terms of dealing with people that have neuro issues that may well be ADHD, dyslexia, and a number of the other ones, you named them already. And only very slowly is the learning system or teaching system adapting to that reality.
Yes, absolutely. And uh, just to let you know, so while I carry the identity of ADHD, I work mostly more broadly in neurodiversity. And so just to give you my perspective on neurodiversity, neurodivergence, and the prevalence and things like that, and the way things are changing. Um, so neurodiversity is all of us, no matter how our brain is wired. One person can't be diverse, right? Only a
No.
group can be diverse, right?
Yeah.
So each of us add our own unique contribution to neurodiversity, which makes us a stronger, more adaptive, resilient species, right? No matter how you think.
Yeah.
Then there's neurodivergence or neurodistinction when someone has a highly unique operating system like ADHD, autism, OCD, dyslexia, PTSD, and more. Permanent, whether acquired or you're born with it, permanent, alterations to your operating system that make you think, work, learn, communicate differently. That is extremely prevalent. I'm not a clinician or a scientist or a statistician, and statistics are hard to come by. but a large portion of the population thinks differently, right? In the past 10 years, between April 2014 and April 2024, understanding of neurodiversity has been increasing at such a rapid rate. Google searches within that time have increased for the word neurodiversity by 2,400%. And in that time, more and more people are sharing your story, where later in life, whether they weren't looking at it because of socioeconomic groups and genders and belief systems and things like that, they weren't looking for it. They've realized the diagnostic criteria has changed around these things, etc. More and more people are realizing in adulthood that they think differently, right? And so a recent poll out of the UK of 4,000 Gen Zers, so young people that are entering the world of work, shared that 53% of them identify as somewhat or definitely ND, right? Um, and two more statistics for you. Over the next 10 years, 30% of the workforce in the United States is going to be made up of that group of Gen Z.
Oh.
And this is three different statistics for three different places, and I'm happy to share the sources with you. I don't have them off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's okay.
A poll of Gen Zers, and a different poll of Gen Zers entering the workforce, said that 80% of them were less likely to apply for a role at a company that lacks support for health and neurodiversity. 80%. So this is a reality that no matter how people think, people are starting to understand that things like the way you think, learn, work, communicate, and even, how it ties into mental health and other wellness, issues, physical health, everything. It matters, and people aren't going to put up with it anymore. And I specialize in work, but I agree with education. They need to catch up as well.
And hence, you have companies like Microsoft that recognize it and say, we have to address that issue so we understand it, so that if we go out and hire people, we will make sure that it is recognized in our organization. They are somewhat different, unique in other different ways, is very, very important. Actually, what I did recently is I have 10 different companies, and so the one company needed a very senior individual, so we advertised right across Canada for that management position. And so I added to the ad that ADHD is considered to be an asset for this position. So that was a little bit different. Now, the other part that I was going to address is at least from my perspective, is what you said in older age is not the reason that they don't have it. A lot of people know they have something that could well be ADHD. But then, on the other hand, I suggest that when I was building my companies and be a very successful medium-sized company, we employ 400 or 500 people and 10 different companies. I'm not here talking about hoorah, hoorah, John, but simply give you a perspective. If I go to the bank and I'm making loans for millions of dollars to build infrastructure, then I said, oh, by the way, and they like my proposal and all of that stuff about but I have a mental disorder, it's called ADHD, they would say, have a nice day. So the stigma attached to it, we are still not quite there. That's why I'm now so vocal about it, and to give encouragement to others. The other day I was doing a presentation actually that was interesting, and in my presentation it made about entrepreneurship, all the other things that I talk about, many other things. But I always kind of put in there ADHD. And then I had several people stick up their fingers and saying, I've never told anybody, but I have ADHD as well. So usually what I say, by the time I'm done with I'm a very good presenter. And so, thanks to ADHD likely, but in any event, so when I make my presentation, and especially about ADHD and what it did for me, and saying it's a superpower, by the time I'm done, there are a lot of people sitting in my guest that say, damn, I wish I had it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I, again, Potentia Workforce, we work on 5 continents with some of the world's biggest companies. And when we start to engage with a team, maybe they weren't the folks, the stakeholders that actually, signed the contract to work with us, but they've been tasked with taking this mission on at their organization, and we get people in a room, whether virtually or in person or around the world, to talk about neurodiversity. Um, Almost every single time we engage with a new team, uh, we have at least someone, and oftentimes it's senior leaders, raise their hand and say, well, now that we're finally talking about this, after I've been working at this company for 10 years, I feel like it's a good time to let everyone know that I got diagnosed as autistic last year, or my son is ADHD, or I'm dyslexic, and you might notice when I do things this way, and I just want to let everyone know that that's why, right? And to your point about the stigma, I just want to say, throwing a lot of statistics out there, but understood.org, which is an organization that does research and journalism and stuff around this topic, did a study that said 59% of working ND professionals fear that disclosing will impact them negatively at work.
And even that's after, the point. That's the
even
point.
After,
yeah.
Even after working in this space for years,
yeah.
I still didn't feel the safety to disclose.
Exactly.
And so you and I are both at points in our lives where we have the ability, we have the privilege to, we have the, you've proven yourself, you don't feel any need to do anything else, but not everyone has that feeling. And so what we like to tell people and companies is to learn the lesson. And now I think identity is really important. I introduce myself just like you do within the first 30 seconds. People know all about me and my brain. I think it's great. But we say learn the lesson and lose the label. And what that means is don't mandate someone to have to prove something to you to get what they need. So, for example, if I was to be working in a co-working space, one of these big modern offices, I would need my noise canceling headphones, which I'm wearing right now, right? And I would need LED lighting instead of fluorescent lighting. Fluorescent lighting really bothers me. But I shouldn't have to provide some sort of paperwork just to be able to be set up for success, to be able to deliver fully for my employer. And imagine something as silly as my desk neighbor's chair squeaking over and over, preventing me from doing that, right? So that's learn the lesson, lose the label. And on the other side of that, just because about someone's identity, like let's say I let you know I have ADHD, that doesn't mean that I'm not good at something. It doesn't mean I'm not concentrating. It doesn't mean I need anything. It doesn't mean I identify as having a disability, because I don't. You don't know what you don't know. So you need to talk about people's strengths, their passions, their perspectives, their needs, in addition to, and identity is great too, but you could just talk about that stuff. And that helps people be more vulnerable and share and explore and embrace what sets them up for success at work.
So I agree with you 100%, Dave. So I'll give you another example. I was born in northeastern Holland, where they speak a dialect. I love speaking dialect, but the rest of Holland don't understand our dialect, and they refer to us as farmers. They're farmers, they came from there. They don't know anything, that kind of a thing. So, but I love speaking dialect even now still from time to time, although there's virtually nobody here that speaks my dialect. So, but in any event, then I had to go into the Air Force, and I had to learn to speak High Dutch. And I have an accent when I speak High Dutch, and then I say farmer. And then I went to Canada, and I could speak English. I knew yes, no, and that was about it. And so I had to learn to speak English. And obviously I'm doing fairly well. And then with my grade 7 3 times, I learned a lot, and I learned well, and I know I'm a very successful business person, and I'm very good at a lot of things. The reason that I'm good at it, but also in terms of managing, I own now my own companies, solo owned actually, but I manage well, but I didn't acquire the skills to learn in how do you manage company in a box. I do just the opposite. I go outside of the box and say, how about if we did it this way, that way, or the other way? That part has made me successful and still is today. So that's why we have 4 silos in my companies. I have a number of lumber mills. I have warehousing, probably the largest warehousing company in northern British Columbia. warehousing, distribution, and logistics. Another silo that is real estate, both residential, commercial, and industrial. And then another one you find this interesting is media, where I do writing books. I'm working on my fifth and sixth book. And then the other part that I do, obviously, podcasting. And then I'm in the process of launching a platform that will become a global platform. And I'm all excited about that. That will be launched fairly quickly here in the next 2 months. So those are the silos that I have. And all of them are successful. The other one that I should show you is that the last book that I wrote, I'm very much into health and fitness. So this is the one that is, I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America, and getting ready to compete at the Arnold's. I was going to compete in 2018, getting ready to compete, and then COVID came. And so now I'm back training. This is what I look like. And then I'm back training again for 2025 at the Arnold's when I'm 85 years old. And so now, just in case, I don't know if you know Arnold Schwarzenegger, but if you see him, tell him that you talked to John Brink. I've sent him several requests for interviewing, and tell him I want him on my podcast, but also tell him that on the Arnold's, I'll be back.
Yeah, so you have a couple things going on, John. But I do want to say, fun fact: Arnold Schwarzenegger is dyslexic.
I know that.
And what's interesting is with certain public figures, they talk about it in a way like they've overcome something, and that's something that. But I would attribute that to a lot of his success. And so sometimes I'll reach out to public figures like that and say, can we talk? Because I just want to let you know. I don't know. I didn't know that Arnold Schwarzenegger needed a pep talk, but I just want to let you know you've got a couple things going on too, kind of like John Brink and kind of like me. Maybe even a little bit more successful, right, Arnold? Well, guess what? I think it's because of how your brain operates, not in spite of it, right?
No question about
it. So I just think that that's an important message for people that have such a big platform. And I think that again, it's changing so rapidly that people are going to catch on.
I have a great deal of respect for Arnold. I know his background. I've read his books, and that what I like about he's a very good presenter, and then and he writes books. In my books, I do audios on all of those books, and I read them myself. But it's more difficult for me to do it. But it's important that I do it. And Arnold, initially at some of the books, he didn't do that. He wrote the foreword, but not the rest. Now he changed his mind about it and is fairly open about it. It takes him longer. Well, it takes me longer too. But I like the idea of accepting the fact I'm dyslexic and I'm ADHD. And I'm proud of it. And my success is not in spite of it, but because of it. And a lot of people say to me, how do you do all the things at nearly 84? You write books, you have 10 different companies, and you're growing all the time. You do social media, and you do all of this. How do you do it? I said, because of ADHD. That's why.
Yeah. And I don't think you'd be comfortable stopping, right? Like I realized that part of the missing link for me in getting my brain to work is working it every single day. Like it's like that cliche of like when a shark stops swimming, it dies, right? Like, and which I guess is true, right? It's like I feel like a fish out of water if I'm not producing, if I'm not creating, if I'm not ideating and coming up with big picture ideas, whether I, follow all the way through with them or not. That's my thing. You know what I mean? When I have to, when I get to spend time with my daughter when my wife's not around, instead of whereas she might play a board game or do dress up or something like that with our daughter, I bring her into the studio and we'll make a nature show, or we'll take cardboard and create a massive fort, right? Yeah. I'm a creator and I'm a big picture guy. You know what I mean? And that is what makes me feel the most normal I can feel, is just I love work. I love what I do. I wouldn't be good at it if I didn't. And that's because I get to do what I do.
Now,
You
the
know.
other part about it, Dave, is that I found is that I did, probably 6, 7, 8 years ago, I did, blogging a lot and like to interact with other people. And then the next thing, I started interviewing issues that were important to me and hopefully to others on one of the local TV shows. And that was good. And I did that until COVID came. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden, I couldn't go there anymore because of COVID. And then I had this apartment here, downtown Prince George. And then we said, why don't we do it on? And we'll do it in our studio, and we'll the apartment into a studio. So we have lots of professional, we have very good pictures because you have to have quality. And I started interviewing people locally. I usually sat on that side, they were sitting here, and we go back and forth. We have the cameras and did all of that. And so we did a couple hundred of those likely. And then we were running out of, there's lots of interesting people, but then I said, well, we have to expand it. So we said, I have an apartment in Vancouver. Maybe we set up another studio there. I really didn't want to do that because then I have to take the whole team down there, blah, 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 duplicate things. Then we said, I was watching TV, CNN, ABC, and all the other ones, and sometimes I see this screen. There's 1, 2, 3 different people, or 4, all in different parts of the world. Virtual. That's the way to do it.
Mhm.
And so we
Mhm.
then started to go virtual, but the problem was finding the right individuals. So then we found podcasts, signed up to them, and very quickly now we are podcasting around the world. Yesterday we had guests from Australia. Tomorrow we may have somebody from Greece, from anywhere. And so this has been amazing, works for me and for my ADHD. I like the challenge of it. You never know what's going to happen. And it's only at its beginning. And hence, the next thing for me is the platform.
You might say that it's on the brink,
It is on the
right?
brink. That's
I'm tying it all together for you, John. No,
yeah,
absolutely, and I will say that a large part of what's enabled my success and the success of many is these this digital transformation, these tools that are at our fingertips now.
right.
I mean, even our company at Potentia, when I say I work around the world, we do travel a bunch for work, but 98% of what I'm doing is virtual from this office right here. Whether I'm working in the Philippines, just in the past week, I've worked. I flew to New York to work in person, but in the day before that, I was working in Germany, but virtually from my home in Nashville.
Yeah.
So, it's just remarkable what we can accomplish, and of course, also that ties into all these organizational tools and AI and communication tools with your manager and work systems and things like that. That you know weren't as possible before to do on a realistic level within the world of work. It's been very, very empowering for me.
The other one that is interesting, you may find interesting, Dave, you are podcast number 314 hosting. 313, I did a podcast with a lady from Australia who does virtual assistance.
Mm.
So very, very interesting, where she has found assistance to other people virtual, mainly from the Philippines, with
Yes.
skill sets. Very interesting podcast. I love that actually. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and there's even apps now for people who have sight impairments. Something called like Be My Eyes is an app where if someone is blind, they can just press a button on their phone, and if they need you to help them read the directions on a microwavable meal or something like that, volunteers get pinged in, and you can volunteer for this app and just help people cross the street, help people, when they're in certain situations, which is absolutely incredible. I mean, the kinds of changes that have happened recently, they benefit people with very unique needs, but they also benefit everybody. I'm not sure if you've heard of the curb cut effect before. Have you heard of the curb cut
I've not
effect?
heard that, no.
So, to tell you I don't know what I know Canada's a really, really nice place, so I don't know how this jives with the narrative in Canada, but it took the United States many, many years to pass what's called the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And one of the that didn't happen until I believe the 70s. One of the things that was included in that is those cuts in the curb that are meant for wheelchairs.
Okay, yeah.
And so now I'm from New York City, but I live in the middle of nowhere in farmland outside of Nashville in Tennessee now, which I love. But no one on my block needs a wheelchair. But
No.
I have curb cuts right outside, all down my block. But who uses them every single day? The
Right.
Amazon delivery driver,
Yeah.
people with strollers, people, drunk people, toddlers, right? Everybody uses and benefits from curb cuts. So when you
Yeah.
start with asking yourself what needs to change to bring in, to invite in, to support, include,
Exactly.
embrace, and leverage those with very specific needs, everybody benefits.
Yeah.
Texting was invented for the deaf. Closed captioning on TV was also invented for the deaf. So all of these tools, they're starting for people with very unique needs, and before you know it, Google has a free version of it, or whatever, because these things benefit every single person.
Now, the next thing that's going to change everything is AI. We could do a whole podcast about that, but just kind of touching on it is that a lot of people are afraid of it. The genie is out of the bottle. It will never go back in, and it will change our world. And I say in a positive way, I believe. No different than the computer did, no different than the iPhone did, no different than some of the other major things that happened. And I believe we are still at a very exciting time, especially for a guy like me, 84 years old, young. I'm going to live till I'm 120, so I'm very careful about my diet. I have lots of sleep, sunshine, and I go to the gym and stay physically fit. And
Absolutely.
then
So you'll be here for, if there is a robot takeover of any kind, you'll be here to fight them because you're
and
working
then
out too, right?
and then use my
So
brain.
you're prepared. I know you are. That's great. No, and I agree. I mean, AI is such an enabler for so many people, and it allows. Sure, there's some concerns or whatever, but the things that I see and use every day for AI. For example, if you can't tell, like you, I like to talk. So sometimes when I get excited, I tend to send emails that are way too long. But meanwhile, it only took me two minutes to type them. But what
Yeah.
can I do? I can copy, paste, put it in an AI, and say, make this more concise and to the point before I send it.
I
And
love it. Yeah.
I probably do that every day. And also because I'm dyslexic, I'll copy and paste a long email or contract or something like that into an AI and say, give give me the key points in bullet points.
Yeah.
Or give me any calls to action, any action items for me. Identify those separately or something like that. Takes me 2 seconds, and I can deliver. Like, yes, sure, AI is replacing certain roles and things like that, but for me, it is allowing me to deliver at an even higher level. And guess what? I and you are irreplaceable. Human thought and creativity and empathy and understanding and leadership are not going to be replaced by robots.
No.
So it's an empowering thing for me, you
Yeah.
know?
And I agree with you 100%. And I look at it the same way, although I could have never imagined this 2, 3, 4 years ago. But that's where we are today. I still have friends around, believe it or not, they're not doing email. I said, "Are you joking?" I don't understand it. But I like to be. I want to be up to date on the technology, although I struggle sometimes with it in terms of fully understanding. But I have lots of people around me that do. But I accept that that's the new world, and I love it, and I'm going to use it as much as I can in the things that I do. It's very, very positive.
Yeah. It's just like understanding around neurodiversity. It's happening with or without people, and you are an early adopter of understanding and embracing both of those things. So, well done.
David, amazing podcast. I just want to all our guests watching us from around the world, to have Dave Thompson on my show talking about all the issues around neurodiversity and other issues relating to ADHD and all the other associated issues. I believe these things are going on around the world and are important for us, I'm sure, for Dave and myself to share with the rest of the world. Subscribe to our podcast, share our podcast with others, like it, comment on them. You know, in terms of all those people, tens of thousands of people that are watching our podcast, feel free to comment on it. Give us ideas, give us concepts, tell us what you think. That encourages both David and myself to even further share with us our ideas about all the things that we're talking about. David, it was a privilege and a pleasure. Let's make sure we stay in touch. Thank you for being a guest on my podcast.
Yes. I hope to speak to you soon. Thank you so much, and thanks to all the listeners for thinking differently with John and I. Thanks.
Take care. Okay, Dave, are you still there, David?
Yes.
That was our podcast. How did it go?
It was excellent, incredible. Your production quality is outstanding, and I yearn to have different apartments in different cities that I can outfit into studios like you one day. That's a great goal for me. So very, very cool. Very cool. Pleasure to know you.
We have a lot of things in common in regards to Nashville. I love country music.
Oh, great. Well, have you ever been to town? Have
No.
you ever been here?
Not in Nashville, no.
Oh, you should stop by. I wasn't a huge. I like old country, old outlaw country like Johnny Cash and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I wasn't really listening to newer stuff, but now that I'm so immersed in it, I'm really having fun. It's such a different culture than being a lifelong New Yorker and coming down here during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Has been very eye-opening and liberating for me. It's been really, really neat.
Let's make sure we stay in touch, and especially once I start my platform, I'm very, very excited about the platform.
Yeah, I would love to chat more about what we both do, and I'll make sure to get your ADHD book and things like that, and I'll be in touch.
Yeah, we'll send it to you.
Oh, awesome.
I'll sign it for you and send it to you. Scott will make sure that you get your address.
Oh,
Thanks,
that's
David.
Incredible. Okay.
Thank
you so much.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.